For many, when they hear the word Thriller, they immediately picture Michael Jackson. Thriller was a hit album for Michael Jackson. In fact, it was one of the top-selling albums of all time. Michael Jackson was mostly known for being an American singer, songwriter, dancer, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. Using Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems approach, an analysis of Michael Jackson's adolescence will be completed. Michael Jackson was born on August 29, 1958 in Gary, Indiana. His parents were Joseph and Catherine Jackson. Both of Michael's parents were musically talented. His father played guitar and his mother played clarinet and piano. Michael had 5 brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and Randy, as well as 3 sisters, Maureen, Latoya, and Janet. While Michael's parents strive for success, they never imagined how drastically their lives would change with the start of the Jackson 5. He was one of the greatest performers of the 80s and 90s and received an award from the Guinness Book of World Records for being the most successful artist ever. After a life full of music, loneliness, controversy, and great despair, Michael Jackson passed away on June 25, 2009, from an accidental overdose of prescribed sleeping medication. Jackson had been in the process of planning a comeback tour. Michael's doctor was charged with and found guilty in 2011 of involuntary manslaughter. In order to provide a clear, concise description of Michael Jackson's adolescence, it is important to discuss the theory used behind the analysis. Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems approach is broken into 4 systems: process, person, context, and time. Michael Jackson was known as the King of Pop, and many would associate him with success. However, he lived an extremely lonely, depressed life and exemplified behaviors that were controversial. It is important to consider the path his life took and what differing elements may have affected the outcome of his life. The elements that should be closely considered include the process or interactions he had over his adolescence, his individual biological or genetic difference, the context of his adolescence, and the time. Throughout this analysis, each process will be clearly defined and analyzed as it relates to Michael Jackson's adolescence. I'm going to assume the audience has knowledge of the definitions, therefore will not be explaining those any further. Jackson's commitment to music and entertaining began at the very early age of 5 years old. He and his 4 brothers began singing together and called themselves the Jackson 5. Jackson eventually became the lead singer of this popular family singing group. Jackson's commitment was encouraged by his parents. The limits of what they had their children do while performing showed no boundaries. In a publication written by Jacqueline Warwick, a statement given by Jackson describing one of these performances was included from his autobiography. Jackson is remembering a performance of Skinny Legs and All from when he was just 9 years old. If you look on the slide, you can see the quotation as I read it to you. We'd start the song, and somewhere in the middle I'd go out into the audience, crawl under the tables, and pull up the ladies' skirts to look under. People would throw money as I scurried by, and when I began to dance, I'd scoop up all the dollars and coins that had hit the floor earlier and push them into the pockets of my jacket. This performance strategy was choreographed by his father, Joseph Jackson. Not only would it be deemed as inappropriate in society for a boy to be looking up women's skirts, but it would be considered inappropriate for a 9-year-old to sing songs with such sexual knowingness. This intense commitment to entertainment was fostered in Jackson at an extremely young age and was carried with him through adolescence. It could be hypothesized that the extreme behaviors that followed him into adulthood could be due to this process of breaking the boundaries set by society at such a young age. The importance of success was driven into Michael Jackson's thinking as soon as the Jackson 5 began. Their parents wanted luxurious lives, and they saw their children as a way to get to that. It was reported many times by the Jackson children that their father, Joseph Jackson, had an abusive and angry parenting style. He wanted nothing less than complete commitment and perfection in the entertainment industry, which carried over through Michael's adolescence into adulthood. Michael Jackson was a self-proclaimed perfectionist. This comes as no surprise, because this process of perfection was instilled in him from the beginning of his singing career at age 5. When researching the effects of perfectionism, a study was found that linked perfectionism to interpersonal conflict and self-criticism. Results from the study indicated that perfectionist personalities seemed to coincide with self-deflating behaviors. It is widely observed that Michael Jackson exhibited self-deflating behaviors. Though he was publicly criticized for these behaviors for years, he was nonconforming. In a journal publication written by Andrew Bortes, it is discussed how many rumors about him, such as trying to become white, were as commonly talked about as much as his hit albums were. In the article, "You Can't Win, Child, but You Can't Get Out of the Game," it was hypothesized that his multiple plastic surgeries were linked to Michael attempting to not resemble his father. Michael Jackson's process of nonconformity could certainly be linked to his extreme dedication and commitment to his music and the entertainment industry. It could be hypothesized that the extreme pressure from the industry during early through late adolescence forced him to feel as though he had to find ways to be different and ways to stand out, no matter the societal views. Also, it could be viewed that his nonconformist ways fueled his dedication and commitment to his music and entertainment. Michael Jackson was famous during his entire adolescence. The world was able to witness Michael through the age of puberty. Michael was widely criticized for his voice and masculinity. Many believed that he had been drugged so that he would not enter puberty and keep his high voice. While Michael and his producers denied all claims to this, it is thought to have had an impact on his self-esteem. This is a reasonable assumption, being that during adolescence it is important for children to receive respect and support versus criticism as to if they're even masculine. Secondly, Michael Jackson's skin color was another demand characteristic that would have affected his adolescence. The African American culture was not easy on Jackson through his adolescence, because they felt like he owed them for his success. Jackson did recognize that he was paving the way for African American singers, and he wanted to unify all cultures. In an interview with John Pigeon, he was quoted saying, "In all the bird family, the peacock is the only species that integrates all colors into one. We, like the peacock, try to integrate all races into one, through the love and power of music. When you go to our concerts, you see every race out there, and they're all waving hands, and they're holding hands, and they're smiling. You see the kids out there dancing, as well as the grown-ups and the grandparents, all colors. That's what's great." Cue one last nervous giggle. "That's what's keeping me going." End quote. This is a profound statement by such a young entertainer. It also shows that he felt an immense amount of pressure to unite cultures. This pressure was not only coming from himself, but from the African American community. Michael Jackson's social resources drastically affected his adolescence. Prior to fame, his father would force the children to stay inside and practice their singing. It was noted that the Jacksons' music brought them closer together as a family, but alienated them from everyone else. Due to this extreme practice regimen, as an adolescent, Michael was robbed the peer influence that was needed to grow. Michael's father was a disciplinarian. In many articles and interviews, Michael's father's heavy hand is discussed. Michael was beaten for mostly everything. This includes mistakes in rehearsal. Out of all of the brothers, though, Michael would fight back, and that would make his beatings worse. Michael also admitted to being afraid of his father. It was noted, without specific detail, that the severe punishment brought on to him by his father was extremely damaging to his emotional state. As an adult, Michael attempted to change his appearance in extreme ways in order to not resemble his father. These social resources that Michael was limited to can be seen as a link to the loneliness and self-deflating behaviors witnessed in Michael's adult life. One way to describe Michael Jackson would be childlike. Many say that he never grew up. In fact, he bought a 2,700-acre ranch and named it Neverland Ranch. He was working to make it just like Peter Pan's Neverland. Michael's favorite places to go was Disney World, Disneyland, and Universal Studios. When he was in public, he would dress in costume, and he became extremely upset when people recognized him. Not because they recognized him, but because his costume wasn't good enough. Another childlike feature that carried into adulthood was his conflict resolution techniques. He was described with having tantrums when his family members did not do things the way he wanted them to. This could be attributed to his sudden rise to fame, as well as to his lack of social interaction with peers outside of his own family. These tantrums were reported to have lasted his entire lifetime. One event specifically that occurred in his 30s was with his sister LaToya. She was writing a book and was going to include private information about him. It was rumored, but never proven, that after getting into a heated argument with her about this information, he hung up the phone and called her publicist. Due to his social status, he convinced the publicist to drop her and ruined her chance at fame. He also never spoke to her again. The microsystem with the greatest impact on Michael Jackson's adolescence was most likely his family. He grew up in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house with 11 people. His family was from a poor neighborhood and kept almost completely to themselves. His parents had differing religious views. His mother was a practicing Jehovah's Witness, while his father claimed religion was boring. He struggled in adulthood with the idea that his childhood was taken away from him due to the pressure from his parents to succeed in order to support his family. Michael's siblings grew to resent him and his fame, which caused loneliness and made his adolescence extremely difficult. On tour, he would witness his father's infidelity, as well as be subject to his abuse. All of these components of his environment could hypothesize that between family feuds, his father's infidelity, and the loss of his childhood, Jackson's future was greatly affected. He resorted to painkillers in adulthood to fight his depression and insomnia, which even led to his accidental death. He took drastic measures to become more childlike. He even developed an obsession with children in an attempt to regain his childhood, which this led to multiple child molestation charges, all of which he was acquitted from. The type of time that Bronfenbrenner describes as macro time would most likely be the time that greatly affected Michael Jackson's adolescence. Slavery ended in the United States in 1865. Jackson was born in 1958. While this was a great deal of time after slavery, the African American culture was still fighting for equality. The Civil Rights Act was not signed until 1963. Due to the time of Michael Jackson's birth, he grew up in the midst of the Civil Rights Movement. This movement allowed for him to have success in the entertainment industry. Prior to the movement, he would not have been able to have had such great success in the American culture at that time. Also, being born during this time made success more difficult for him. He was still looked down upon as a black man and had to fight adversity all throughout his adolescence. Analysis of Michael Jackson's adolescence using Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems approach has shown different issues affecting adolescents in high-pressure environments. 3 of these implications to be of concern would be the lack of peer influence due to the lack of exposure, causing loneliness, possible nonconformity due to heightened desire to be better than others, as well as a perfectionist mentality leading to depression. With the magnitude and depth of these issues being considered, the greatest systematic outcome would come from society in general. Understanding these issues as a society, as well as educating others about them, will aid adults working with adolescents who are in high-pressure situations. This concludes my analysis of Michael Jackson using Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems approach. These next 2 pages include the resources used to compile this analysis. Thank you for your time.